Chapter 1. The Unexpected Agreement. A Diplomatic Gamble. The sprawling Galactic Coalition embassy floated like a jewel above the sprawling megalopolis of Novosphere Prime, a city that was equal parts stunning and intimidating. Home to the Coalition's diplomatic corps, its glass towers reached into the stratosphere, brimming with alien and human delegations from across the galaxy. The tension within its halls was palpable, especially for Ronan Drake, a rugged and no-nonsense ex-soldier turned diplomat. Ronan leaned against a sleek, shimmering column in the central chamber, his hazel eyes fixed on the holographic projections that spun slowly in the array display of warring star charts and fleet positions. For the past 3 weeks, Ronan had been neck-deep in negotiations with the Reiner Empire, a powerful alien civilization known for its advanced technology and an infamously rigid caste system. Things weren't going well. The Reiner fleet had amassed on the borders of Coalition space after a mining incident on VYRN 12, where a human company had apparently trespassed into Reiner-controlled space. The Reiner, a proud and territorial species, demanded reparations or else. Humanity, still new to the galactic stage, could not afford a full-scale war. "It's not just about Earth," Ronan muttered, rubbing the stubble on his chin. If the Reiner decide to push, half the Coalition would collapse under their fleet. The human delegation murmured nervously nearby, occasionally glancing at Ronan. He wasn't a polished diplomat like the others, and his presence in the negotiations had been a desperate gamble. A former combat officer in the Terran Defense Force, Ronan had spent years fighting pirates and raiders in the lawless sectors of space before retiring. His blunt demeanor and battlefield pragmatism weren't ideal for diplomacy, but his knack for understanding alien cultures made him invaluable in high-stakes situations like this one. "Ronan," said Ambassador Callan, a gray-haired diplomat whose pristine suit contrasted sharply with Ronan's more utilitarian outfit, "are you sure about this approach? The Reiner are not known for flexibility." Ronan smirked, his confidence belying the knot of anxiety in his stomach. "Flexibility isn't the point. It's about understanding what they really want." Callan raised an eyebrow. "And you think you know what that is?" "I've got a hunch," Ronan said. The Reiner delegation. The air in the negotiation chamber was heavy as the towering doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the Reiner delegation. Leading the group was Grand Vizier Krythos, a tall, imposing figure draped in ceremonial armor. His iridescent, scaled skin shimmered under the chamber's lights, and his 4 glowing eyes scanned the room with cool disdain. Behind him trailed a group of advisors and guards, their expressions unreadable. But it wasn't Krythos who caught Ronan's attention. It was the young woman walking at the back of the group. She was Princess Liara, the youngest daughter of the Reiner Emperor. Though shorter than her kin, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that set her apart. Her features were striking smooth silver skin marked with faint, glowing patterns and long, dark hair that flowed like liquid obsidian. Her piercing blue eyes met Ronan's briefly, and he saw something unexpected. Frustration, perhaps even sadness. "That's her," Ronan thought. For weeks, he'd been studying every detail about the Reiner Empire, looking for any leverage. What he discovered was surprising. The Reiner had a rigid social hierarchy, and their royal family was bound by ancient traditions that often clashed with modern politics. Liara, as the youngest and least powerful member of the royal family, had been treated as a pawn her entire life. More importantly, she was rumored to be at odds with her father and her brothers. If Ronan was right, she might be the key to diffusing this entire crisis. The proposal. The negotiations began, and as expected, Krythos demanded reparations. "Your people have trespassed on sacred Reiner territory," he said, his voice a deep rumble that resonated through the chamber. "This insult cannot go unanswered." Ambassador Callan attempted to appease him with offers of mineral compensation, but Krythos scoffed. "Trinkets and resources will not undo the damage to our honor." Ronan leaned forward, his gaze locked on Krythos. "Then what will?" The room went silent. Krythos turned his 4 glowing eyes toward Ronan, his expression unreadable. Honor must be restored with more than mere words. An alliance, perhaps? Ronan's mind raced. This was the opening he needed. An alliance? Between our people? Krythos nodded slowly. A bond of blood. A marriage, to unite our species and prove humanity's commitment to peace. The other humans in the room froze, their shock palpable. Marriage? It was unthinkable. No one had expected Krithos to make such a demand, and no one knew how to respond. But Ronan did. "I accept," he said, standing. The room erupted into chaos. Callan grabbed Ronan's arm, hissing, "What are you doing?" "Ending this standoff," Ronan replied calmly. Krithos raised a hand, silencing the room. "You? A soldier turned diplomat? What makes you think you are worthy of such a bond?" Ronan smirked. "I may not be a prince, but I've proven myself in ways that matter. If this alliance is what it takes to avoid war, then I'll do whatever it takes." Krithos studied him for a long moment, then turned to Liara. "Princess, do you object?" Liara stepped forward, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. "You're taking me as your wife?" she asked, her voice soft but incredulous. Ronan met her gaze, his tone steady. "If you'll have me." She stared at him for what felt like an eternity, then nodded. "Very well." The aftermath. The negotiations ended with the agreement that Ronan and Liara would be wed in a formal ceremony, cementing the alliance between humanity and the Reiner Empire. While the decision prevented immediate war, it created a storm of controversy. Back in the human embassy, Ronan faced a barrage of questions and criticism. "You've overstepped your authority," Callan shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I stopped a war," Ronan replied firmly. "And I gave humanity a seat at the table with one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy." Callan threw up his hands in frustration, but he couldn't argue with the results. Later that evening, Ronan found Liara sitting alone on a balcony overlooking the glowing cityscape of Novosphere Prime. She didn't turn as he approached. "You're not what I expected," she said, her tone neutral. "Neither are you," Ronan replied, leaning against the railing. "But maybe that's a good thing." Liara glanced at him, her blue eyes shimmering in the city lights. "Do you really think this will work? This alliance?" "I don't know," Ronan admitted. "But I do know that we have a chance to make something better than what we started with. And I think you're just as tired of being a pawn as I am." Liara's lips curved into a faint smile. "You're more perceptive than I thought, human." "Ronan," he corrected. "If we're going to be married, you might as well call me by my name." She chuckled softly. "Very well, Ronan. Let's see if your boldness is enough to keep the galaxy from tearing itself apart." And so, the most unlikely alliance in galactic history was forged not through weapons or treaties, but through a marriage that would test the limits of trust, understanding, and love. Chapter 2. A Marriage of Convenience. The Ceremony of Unity. The announcement of the impending marriage between Ronan Drake, a human ex-soldier turned diplomat, and Princess Liara of the Reiner Empire sent shockwaves through both civilizations. The decision to unite their peoples through a diplomatic marriage was met with mixed reaction celebration from those who sought peace and outrage from those who saw the union as a betrayal of tradition. The Reiner insisted the ceremony be conducted on their homeworld, Kalar Prime, a planet known for its towering crystal cities and ceremonial grandeur. Ronan found himself aboard a sleek Reiner transport ship, its alien technology far more advanced than anything humanity had developed. "This is ridiculous," Ronan muttered to himself as he adjusted the stiff ceremonial robes the Reiner had provided. The fabric shimmered with a faint silver glow, and the intricate patterns on its surface seemed to shift with his movements. "You look uncomfortable," Liara said, her tone neutral as she entered the room. She wore a flowing gown of deep sapphire, adorned with glowing symbols that matched the markings on her skin. Her regal demeanor was undeniable, but there was a flicker of amusement in her piercing blue eyes. "Uncomfortable doesn't even begin to cover it," Ronan replied, tugging at the collar. "I'm a mechanic at heart, not a prince. I don't even know what half of these symbols mean. They represent unity, balance, and strength," Liara said, her voice softening. "They're ancient symbols of our people." Ronan paused, lowering his hands. "Do they mean something to you?" Liara hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but their meaning has been overshadowed. This ceremony is more for show than anything else, a display of power and tradition." Ronan studied her, sensing the weight of her words. "So, you're not thrilled about this either?" She let out a faint laugh. "You think I dreamed of marrying a human? My life has been nothing but obligations and orders. But I see the value in this alliance. Perhaps we can make something of it." Ronan smirked. Glad we're on the same page. The ceremony. The Grand Hall of the Kalar Citadel was a masterpiece of alien architecture, its crystalline walls refracting light into dazzling displays of color. Thousands of Reiner and a handful of human dignitaries filled the chamber, their murmurs silenced as Ronan and Liara stepped onto the central platform. Grand Vizier Krithos stood between them, his voice booming as he recited the ancient vows of unity. The language was foreign to Ronan, but the weight of the moment was unmistakable. When it was time for the final declaration, Krithos turned to Liara. Do you, Princess Liara of the Reiner Empire, accept this union as a symbol of peace and strength? Liara's gaze flickered to Ronan, and for a brief moment, her composed mask faltered. Then she straightened, her voice steady. I do. Krithos turned to Ronan. And do you, Ronan Drake of Earth, pledge to honor this bond and uphold the unity of our peoples? Ronan glanced at the crowd, then back at Liara. I do. With the ceremonial exchange complete, Krithos raised his arms. It is done. Let this union mark the dawn of a new era. The hall erupted in applause, though Ronan noticed many of the Reiner nobles clapping reluctantly. Private conversations. After the ceremony, a lavish reception was held in the Citadel's gardens, where holographic lanterns floated above exotic flora. Ronan tried to navigate the sea of Reiner aristocrats, their sharp, glowing eyes watching him with thinly veiled suspicion. This is exhausting, Ronan muttered as he finally found a quiet corner. Liara appeared beside him, holding a delicate crystal glass filled with an iridescent liquid. You're handling it better than I expected. I'm used to fixing things, not playing politics, Ronan said. But you seem to be in your element. Liara sighed, her regal mask slipping. You'd be surprised. Most of these people don't respect me. They see me as expendable, a pawn to be used and discarded. Ronan frowned. Then why go along with this? Because it's the only way to prove them wrong, Liara said, her voice firm. If this alliance works, it will be because of us, not them. Ronan raised his glass. To proving them wrong, then? Liara hesitated, then clinked her glass against his. To proving them wrong? The shadow of sabotage. The following morning, Ronan was summoned to the Citadel Security Council. A grave-faced Reiner officer informed him of disturbing news. Someone had attempted to sabotage the wedding. We found explosives hidden in the ceremonial hall, the officer said. They were disarmed before they could be activated, but the message is clear: there are factions within the Empire that oppose this union. Ronan clenched his fists. Do you know who's responsible? Not yet, the officer admitted, but we believe they may strike again. Ronan stormed out of the council chamber, his mind racing. When he found Liara in the Citadel's garden, he didn't bother hiding his frustration. They tried to sabotage the ceremony, he said bluntly. You could have been killed. Liara's expression hardened. I'm not surprised. Many within the Empire see this marriage as a threat to their power. But I won't let them intimidate me. Ronan admired her resolve, but he couldn't shake his concern. You shouldn't have to face this alone. We're in this together now, remember? Liara's gaze softened. Together, then? Building trust. Over the next several days, Ronan and Liara worked to solidify their alliance. They attended diplomatic meetings, strategized ways to counter their opposition, and even shared quiet moments where they began to understand each other's worlds. Ronan learned about Liara's struggles within the rigid Reiner hierarchy, her dreams of breaking free from tradition, and her quiet defiance of her father's expectations. Liara, in turn, discovered Ronan's resourcefulness, his practical wisdom, and his unyielding determination to protect those he cared about. Though their union had begun as a political arrangement, something deeper began to take root in understanding, a partnership, and perhaps even the faint beginnings of trust. But as they grew closer, the shadow of sabotage loomed ever larger. Unseen enemies conspired against them, and the stakes grew higher with each passing day. Chapter 3. The Web of Conspiracy. Unveiling the Enemy. The days following the wedding were tense. Ronan and Princess Liara worked tirelessly to cement the fragile alliance between Earth and the Reiner Empire, but whispers of dissent grew louder with each passing day. Their every move was watched, their every decision scrutinized. The failed sabotage attempt at the ceremony had been just the beginning. Late one evening, As Ronan reviewed reports in his quarters, a sharp knock at the door broke his concentration. Before he could respond, the door slid open, revealing General Kedros, a grizzled Reiner officer with a reputation for unflinching loyalty to the Empire. "We need to talk," Kedros said, his voice low and urgent. Ronan gestured to a chair. "What's on your mind?" Kedros hesitated, his glowing eyes flickering in the dim light. "There's a faction within the Empire, the Zareth Order. They see this alliance as a threat to our traditions and our sovereignty. The explosives at your ceremony? That was their doing." Ronan leaned forward, his fists clenching. "Do you have proof?" Kedros nodded. "We intercepted communications between their operatives. They're planning something bigger, an attack that could shatter the alliance before it even begins." Liara entered the room at that moment, her expression sharp. "What kind of attack?" Kedros glanced at her, his respect evident. "They're targeting the Unity Summit in 2 days. If they succeed, it will be seen as a declaration of war." Ronan stood, his mind racing. The Unity Summit was meant to be the first joint meeting between human and Reiner leaders, a symbolic gesture of peace. If it were attacked, the consequences would be catastrophic. "We can't let that happen," Ronan said. "What do we know about their plan?" Kedros hesitated. "Only that it involves a high-ranking official, someone close to the summit." Liara's eyes narrowed. "You think there's a traitor among us?" The hidden threat. With Kedros' warning fresh in their minds, Ronan and Liara began working together to uncover the traitor's identity. The days were long, filled with tense meetings and secret investigations. Ronan's experience as a soldier proved invaluable. His sharp instincts and ability to read people helped them narrow their list of suspects. Liara, meanwhile, used her position within the royal family to gather intelligence. Her status gave her access to high-ranking officials, but it also made her a target. She moved carefully, always aware of the eyes watching her. One night, as they reviewed their findings in Liara's chambers, Ronan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "This Zareth Order. What do they actually want? Why are they so against the alliance?" Liara sighed, her glowing patterns dimming. "They believe the Empire's strength lies in isolation. To them, unity with outsiders is a weakness, a betrayal of our heritage." Ronan frowned. "Sounds like they're clinging to a past that doesn't exist anymore." Liara smiled faintly. "You sound like me." Ronan looked at her, his expression softening. "I think we're more alike than either of us expected." For a moment, the tension between them eased, and Liara's guarded demeanor slipped. "Perhaps," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The betrayal. The day of the Unity Summit arrived, and the Grand Hall of the Kalar Citadel was alive with activity. Delegates from Earth and the Reiner Empire filled the chamber, their voices blending into a hum of anticipation. Security was tight, with guards stationed at every entrance. Ronan stood beside Liara at the head of the room, his eyes scanning the crowd. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The atmosphere was too tense, the smiles too forced. As the speeches began, Ronan's comm device buzzed. He stepped aside, answering the call from Kedros. "We've found the traitor," Kedros said, his voice grim. "It's Vizier Krithos." Ronan's blood ran cold. Krithos had been the one to propose the marriage. Had this all been a ploy? "Are you sure?" he asked. "Positive," Kedros replied. "He's in the building, and he's armed." Ronan turned to Liara, his voice urgent. "It's Krithos. He's planning something." Liara's eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "We need to stop him." The confrontation. Ronan and Liara moved quickly, slipping out of the main chamber and into the Citadel's labyrinthine halls. Kedros' team provided them with Krithos' last known location, a restricted wing near the power generators. As they approached, Ronan drew his weapon, his senses on high alert. Liara followed, her glowing patterns shifting with a mix of determination and fear. They found Krithos in a control room, standing over a console. His ceremonial armor gleamed under the harsh lights, and his expression was one of cold resolve. "Krithos," Liara said, her voice steady. "Step away from the console." He turned to face them, his 4 glowing eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be here, princess." "Neither should you," Ronan said, his weapon trained on the vizier. "What's the plan, Krithos? Blow the generators and blame it on humanity?" Krithos sneered. You don't understand. This alliance is a mistake. The Reiner do not need humanity. We are stronger alone. By killing your own people? Liara shot back. That's not strength, Krythos. That's cowardice. Krythos' hand moved toward the console, but Ronan fired a warning shot, the blast scorching the wall beside him. Don't, Ronan warned. Whatever you're trying to do, it ends here. For a moment, Krythos hesitated. Then, with a snarl, he lunged toward the console. Liara acted quickly, using a small energy pulse from her wrist device to disable the controls. Krythos turned on her, but Ronan tackled him before he could strike. The two men grappled, their struggle fierce and chaotic. Krythos was strong, his alien physiology giving him an advantage, but Ronan's training and determination gave him the edge. With a final, forceful blow, Ronan pinned Krythos to the ground. It's over, Ronan said, breathing heavily. Kedros and his guards arrived moments later, taking Krythos into custody. The vizier glared at Liara as he was led away. This alliance will fail, he spat. Your people will never accept it. Liara met his gaze, her expression resolute. We'll see. A new beginning. The Unity Summit continued without further incident, and the alliance between Earth and the Reiner Empire was solidified. Ronan and Liara stood together as the delegates pledged their support, their unlikely partnership now a symbol of hope. Later that evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the citadel, Ronan turned to Liara. You think this will work? Liara smiled faintly. I think we have a chance. And sometimes that's enough. Ronan nodded, his gaze steady. Together, then? Together, Liara agreed. And as the stars above Kalar Prime shimmered brightly, the two of them began to believe that perhaps, against all odds, their union could change the galaxy. Chapter 4. A Union Tested. The Summit's Aftermath. The Unity Summit ended as a symbolic triumph, with humans and Reiner exchanging pledges of peace and cooperation. The tense atmosphere began to ease, and the delegates seemed cautiously optimistic. But for Ronan Drake and Princess Liara, the events behind the scenes weighed heavily. Vizier Krythos, the mastermind of the sabotage, was now imprisoned, but his venomous words still lingered in their minds. As Ronan leaned on the balcony of their shared quarters that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that their work was far from over. The cool air of Kalar Prime was a welcome reprieve after the chaos of the summit, but it did little to calm his racing thoughts. Liara joined him, her flowing robes glowing faintly in the moonlight. She leaned against the railing, her expression thoughtful. You're quiet, she said softly. Just thinking, Ronan replied. Krythos may be locked up, but the Zareth Order is still out there. They won't stop just because we stopped him. Liara nodded. They've lost their figurehead, but their ideology remains. And there are others who share their beliefs on both sides. Ronan sighed, his hand running through his hair. You think humanity's ready for this alliance? That your people are? She turned to face him, her blue eyes meeting his. I think readiness doesn't matter anymore. This is our reality now. We have to make it work, whether they're ready or not. Ronan smirked. I guess that's why they sent you to the altar. You've got more guts than most politicians I've met. Liara's lips twitched in a faint smile. And you're braver than most humans I've known. The Zareth Order strikes again. Their moment of quiet reflection was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. It was General Kedros, his face grim. There's been an attack, he said without preamble. The Zareth Order struck one of our military supply depots near the border. It's an act of war. Ronan's jaw clenched. What's the damage? Significant, Kedros replied. They left a message claiming responsibility. They're calling the alliance a betrayal and demanding its dissolution. Liara's expression darkened. And if we refuse? Kedros hesitated. They're threatening to attack the coalition embassy on Kalar Prime. They want to make an example of the humans here. Ronan's fists tightened. They want to scare us into backing out. We can't let them. Liara straightened, her glowing patterns flickering with resolve. No, we can't. But this won't stop unless we deal with the Order directly. The mission to end the Zareth Order. Kedros provided intel on the Zareth Order's stronghold, located in the icy mountains of Kalar Prime's northern hemisphere. The site was well fortified, hidden within a network of ancient caverns. It wouldn't be an easy mission, but Ronan and Liara agreed it was their best chance to dismantle the threat. The mission was unconventional. Liara insisted on joining, despite the risks. "This alliance is as much mine as yours," she argued. "If I'm to lead my people, I must face their darkness alongside you." Ronan reluctantly agreed, though the thought of her in danger unsettled him. They assembled a small team of human and Reiner operatives, combining the best of both worlds. Kedros accompanied them, his combat experience invaluable. The journey to the stronghold was treacherous, the icy winds howling as their dropship descended into the frozen wilderness. As they approached the caverns, Ronan felt the familiar adrenaline of combat coursing through his veins. "This feels like old times," he muttered, checking his weapon. Liara glanced at him, her expression a mix of determination and nervous energy. "You've done this before?" "More times than I can count," Ronan replied. "Stick close to me. We'll get through this." She nodded, gripping the hilt of a small, glowing blade, a traditional Reiner weapon. The final confrontation. The team infiltrated the caverns under cover of darkness, their movements precise and silent. The Zareth Order's forces were numerous but poorly organized, their zealotry blinding them to basic strategy. Ronan and Liara worked in perfect tandem, their bond growing stronger with every step. As they reached the heart of the stronghold, they found the Order's new leader, Commander Virak, a fanatical Reiner with a chilling presence. He stood before a crowd of his followers, delivering a fiery speech about the Empire's glory and the corruption of the Alliance. "We will purge the weak," Virak declared, "and restore the Empire's purity." Ronan stepped forward, his voice cutting through the cavern like a blade. "Purity, huh? Sounds more like fear to me." The crowd turned, shocked by the intrusion. Virak sneered, "And you must be the human who dares to defile our traditions." "Defiling traditions is what I do best," Ronan said, his weapon trained on the commander. "But if you're so obsessed with purity, why don't you fight me yourself? Or are you afraid of a little competition?" Virak snarled, stepping forward. "You think you can challenge me, human?" Liara stepped beside Ronan, her glowing blade at the ready. He's not alone. The sight of their united front seemed to unsettle the crowd. Virak's confidence wavered, but he quickly regained his composure. "So be it. If you wish to die together, I will oblige." The ensuing battle was chaotic. Virak's followers attacked with ferocity, but Ronan and Liara's team held their ground. The princess fought with precision and grace, her blade glowing like a star as she cut through her enemies. Ronan, meanwhile, relied on his soldiers' instincts, his blaster finding its mark with deadly accuracy. The fight culminated in a final showdown between Ronan, Liara, and Virak. The commander was a formidable opponent, his strength and speed unmatched. But together, Ronan and Liara overwhelmed him, their partnership proving stronger than his fanaticism. As Virak fell, the remaining members of the Zareth Order fled, their resolve shattered. A new dawn. The aftermath of the mission was a turning point. With the Zareth Order dismantled, the immediate threat to the Alliance was neutralized. Back on Kalar Prime, Ronan and Liara were hailed as heroes, their bond inspiring a new sense of unity between their peoples. In the weeks that followed, the Alliance began to take root. Joint initiatives were launched, cultural exchanges flourished, and old prejudices began to fade. It wasn't a perfect union, but it was a start. One evening, as Ronan and Liara stood on the balcony of their quarters, watching the twin moons of Kalar Prime rise, Ronan broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever stop fighting to prove this alliance is worth it?" Liara smiled faintly. "Probably not, but I think that's what makes it worth fighting for." Ronan chuckled. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." She raised an eyebrow. "And you're braver than I expected." They shared a quiet laugh, the weight of their journey momentarily lifting. For the first time, they allowed themselves to hope not just for the alliance, but for something more. As the stars above shimmered brightly, the human and the alien princess stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy had in store.